The night she blew up her own cabin, the mountain shook and three grown men screamed. But no one talks about that part. They talk about her weight. They talk about how she was too much woman for one coffin. They laugh ha 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 like it was all some joke. What they don't talk about is how a so-called burden became the only reason a broken mountain man chose to live. And they definitely don't talk about the moment she lit the fuse, but we'll get there. Because before the fire, before the gunshots, before the snow swallowed everything, there was a bakery. And a girl named Martha Briar Hale. In the summer of 1886, the heat in Red Hollow, Colorado clung to skin like shame. Martha felt both every time she stepped outside. At 25, she carried over 300 pounds on a 5'4" frame. In a town where women were praised for being dainty as lace gloves, Martha was built like a bread oven, solid, warm, impossible to ignore. Her father made sure she never forgot it. "Move, girl," Harold Hale snapped, shoving past her in the bakery. "You block half the window standing there." She stepped aside, cheeks burning. "I was just wiping the glass." "With what?" "Your sleeve," he scoffed. "Heaven help us, customers come in for pies, not a spectacle." From the front counter, two women whispered, not quietly, "She's gotten bigger. I swear she widens every season." "Ha ha ha," Martha pretended she didn't hear. She had learned that trick early. Swallow it, smile small, disappear if you can't shrink. Her younger sister, Leela, breezed in wearing a pale blue dress stitched too tight at the waist for dramatic effect. "Mr. Davenport called," Leela sang sweetly. "He says the wedding cake samples were lovely. He asked if I'd help choose icing tomorrow." "Not we," Harold beamed at Leela like she was gold spun into human form. "Well, at least one of my daughters turned out presentable." Martha felt something inside her chest crack, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. She carried trays to the back room, sat on an overturned flour barrel, and let herself weep, not the loud, choking kind, the silent kind, the kind that makes your shoulders shake while you press your fist against your mouth so no one hears, because if they hear, they laugh, and she was tired of being laughter. That night, under the slanted attic ceiling above the bakery, Martha pulled out a folded letter she'd hidden beneath a loose floorboard. It was from a land agent. A widower in the northern mountains required a wife immediately to secure his claim. He requested a woman capable of enduring hardship. He did not request beauty. He did not request refinement. He requested endurance. Martha ran her thumb over the paper. "Maybe," she whispered into the dark, voice trembling, "maybe I was built for something more than hiding." Outside, thunder rolled over Red Hollow, and somewhere high in the Blackridge Mountains, a man who hadn't smiled in 10 years sharpened a knife and waited for a wife he did not want. But he had no idea the real storm was coming with her, and neither of them were ready for what would happen when the snow finally trapped them alone. Martha did not sleep that night. She lay awake beneath the slanted roof, staring at the cracked plaster above her cot, the letter clutched in her fist like it might disappear if she loosened her grip. A widower, northern mountains, immediate marriage required. No mention of affection, no mention of kindness, just endurance. Downstairs, the bakery ovens cooled with soft ticking sounds. The smell of yeast and sugar drifted upward, usually comforting. Tonight it felt suffocating. By morning, the decision had already rooted itself inside her. It happened at breakfast. Leela fluttered into the kitchen, practically glowing. "Father, Mr. Davenport asked if we might announce the engagement this Sunday." Harold laughed, delighted. "About time he made it official, a fine match." Then his eyes shifted to Martha. "You see, girl, this is how it's done. A man wants something pleasant on his arm, not—" He gestured vaguely in her direction. "Excess." Leela tried to look sympathetic. She failed. Martha's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "I received an offer," she said quietly. Harold didn't even look up. "From who?" "The butcher needing help hauling pigs," Leela giggled. "Oh, don't be cruel." Martha set her fork down carefully, very carefully. "From a land agent. A man in the Blackridge Mountains requires a wife. I leave in 3 days." Silence. It didn't explode. It didn't shatter. It dropped like a stone into deep water. Harold blinked. "You're joking." "No, you," he barked a harsh laugh. "Who would?" "He's a widower," Martha said, voice steady now. "He owns 200 acres of timberline property. He needs a legal wife to keep it." And he's blind, Leela whispered. Harold leaned back in his chair. You think you'll survive up there, snow 6 feet deep, wolves, hard labor. You'll come crawling back within a month. Martha met his eyes for the first time in years. I would rather freeze on a mountain, she said softly, than rot in this kitchen while you all measure me like livestock. The words hung between them. Leela's face went pale. Harold slammed his palm on the table. If you leave this house, don't expect to return. Martha swallowed. She had expected that. Then I won't, she stood. Her chair scraped loudly against the wooden floor, the sound sharp and final. For once, no one laughed. 3 days later, the stagecoach driver groaned when he saw her trunk. Then he saw her. The springs creaked as she climbed aboard. Two passengers exchanged looks. Ha ha ha, this will be cramped. Martha kept her gaze forward. The road stretched west, flat plains turning slowly into rising shadowed peaks. The air thinned as the days passed, so did her fear. With every mile, Red Hollow felt smaller. With every mile, something inside her felt bigger. But as the stage reached the final trading post before the Blackridge ascent, the station master squinted at her. You the woman going up to Rowan Kincaid? Her stomach tightened. Yes, the man spat into the dirt. Hope you pray. Why? He studied her face for a long moment. Because Rowan Kincaid didn't lose his first wife to winter, Martha's breath caught. He lost her to something far worse. The wind shifted, and high in the mountains, a massive black horse turned toward the trail. Someone was coming, but not for love, and Martha had no idea what she was truly walking into. The mountain did not welcome her, it watched. Martha sat on her trunk outside the trading post, hands folded tight in her lap, pretending she wasn't listening to the whispers. Rowan Kincaid hasn't come down in months. He don't like people. He don't forgive neither. The sun dipped behind jagged peaks, casting long purple shadows across the snow-dusted ground. The air felt thinner here, sharper. Each breath scraped her lungs. You sure he knows what you look like? The station master asked bluntly. Martha stiffened. He received my photograph. Face only, she didn't answer. A low vibration rolled through the earth. At first she thought it was thunder. Then the trees parted. The horse came first, a massive black stallion with a scar across its flank. Steam curled from its nostrils like dragon smoke. Then the rider. Rowan Kincaid sat tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a dark wool coat lined with fur. He wasn't 7 feet tall like rumors claimed, but he was close enough to make most men look like boys. A jagged scar cut from his temple down into his beard. His eyes found her immediately and stayed there. Martha stood slowly. Her knees wanted to buckle. He didn't dismount, didn't greet her, didn't smile. You Hale, his voice was deep, rough, unused to softness. Yes, her voice cracked. She cleared it. Martha Briar Hale, silence. His gaze moved deliberately, boots, skirt, hips, shoulders, face. She felt stripped without a hand touching her. The station master coughed awkwardly. Well, he muttered, there she is. Rowan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Broker said sturdy, he said flatly. I am, Martha replied. The pause stretched. Snowflakes began to fall soft at first. Rowan swung off the saddle in one fluid motion. The ground seemed to feel it. He walked toward her. Every instinct screamed at her to step back. She didn't. He stopped close enough that she could smell pine, leather, and cold steel. You tell him, Rowan asked. Tell who? The broker, about all of you. There it was, the question. Martha lifted her chin. I told him I was capable of hard work and not afraid of isolation. Rowan studied her face. You ain't what I expected. Her stomach dropped. I could say the same, she replied quietly. For a split second, a flicker, not amusement, not anger, something unreadable, then it was gone. He turned abruptly, lifting her heavy trunk with one arm and strapping it to a mule like it weighed nothing. Storm's coming, he muttered. We ride now. The snow thickened, the sky darkened fast. Martha stared up at the towering horse. I can't mount that without help. Rowan exhaled sharply like she'd inconvenienced him. For God's sake. Then his hands were on her waist, large, calloused, warm despite the cold. He lifted her, effortlessly. For one suspended second, she was pressed against his chest. His heart was pounding, so was hers. He set her in the saddle and stepped back quickly as if burned. I'll walk, he said gruffly, taking the reins. That's 5 miles uphill. I know. and he began pulling the horse into the rising storm. Snow swallowed the trail behind them, the wind howled louder, and Martha realized something unsettling. Rowan Kincaid wasn't angry, he was bracing. Like a man preparing for something he'd been dreading. Halfway up the ridge, lightning cracked across the sky, and Rowan suddenly froze, not at the thunder, but at the distant silhouette of smoke rising from somewhere near his cabin. Someone else was already on the mountain, and they weren't there to welcome a bride. "Stay behind me," Rowan's voice changed. It wasn't cold anymore, it was lethal. The wind whipped snow across Martha's face as she squinted toward the distant ribbon of smoke twisting into the gray sky. "That's your cabin?" she asked. No, the single word hit harder than the wind. Rowan handed her the reins and moved ahead on foot, boots crunching fast through the thickening snow. The stallion shifted nervously beneath her. Rowan, quiet, not cruel, focused. They crested the final ridge just as thunder rolled again. Below them, tucked against a rock face, stood a small hunting shed, half-burned, blackened along one side. Smoke still curled from its roof. Rowan stopped walking, his shoulders went rigid. Martha saw his hands flex. "Someone's been here," she whispered. "They knew I was gone." The words were tight, controlled, but beneath them rage simmered. Rowan moved forward cautiously, scanning the tree line. Martha forced herself down from the horse, nearly slipping in the snow. He turned sharply. "I told you, I'm not made of glass," she snapped before she could stop herself. Silence. Their eyes locked, wind howled between them, then he looked away first. Inside the shed, tools had been thrown, a stack of chopped wood kicked over, nothing stolen, just disturbed. "Message," Rowan muttered. "For what?" "For me." His jaw ticked. He stepped outside again, scanning the snow. Then he saw it, boot prints, 3 sets, leading away toward the lower pass, not toward town, toward the forest. "They weren't trying to hide," Martha said quietly. "No," he looked at her then, really looked at her. "You should turn back." Her heart thudded painfully. "Back where?" "Red Hollow." She almost laughed at that, almost. "Ha ha ha, you think that's safer?" He didn't answer. Because they both knew it wasn't. Another crack of thunder split the sky. Snow fell heavier now, blinding. "We have to move," Rowan said. "Cabin's a mile further." He grabbed the reins again, walking fast. The climb grew steeper. Martha's thighs burned, her lungs felt like they were shrinking. Halfway up she slid. Before she could fall fully, Rowan caught her, his arm wrapped around her middle, solid as iron. "Careful." The word came out softer than before. She nodded, breath trembling. For a moment neither moved. They were close, too close. She could see the faint lines at the corner of his eyes, not from laughter, from strain. "You're not afraid," she said suddenly. "Yes, I am." The admission stunned her. "Of what?" His gaze shifted toward the mountain. "History." Before she could ask what that meant, a gunshot cracked from somewhere in the trees. The stallion reared violently. Martha screamed. Rowan shoved her down into the snow as another shot split the air, splintering bark from a pine trunk inches from where her head had been. "Inside the rocks," he barked. He pulled her toward a jagged outcropping as bullets tore through branches above them. Her heart pounded so hard she thought she might faint. "Who is that?" she cried. Rowan's eyes turned glacial. "Men who don't want me keeping this land." Another shot rang out, closer, and this time Rowan reached for the rifle strapped across his back, but his hands weren't shaking. They were steady, too steady, like he'd done this before. Like he'd survived it before, and Martha suddenly realized she hadn't married a monster. She had married a man already at war. The third shot shattered the quiet between heartbeats. Wood splintered inches from Rowan's shoulder. Martha's ears rang. "Stay down," he ordered, pushing her behind the jagged rock formation. Snow soaked through her skirt instantly. The cold bit into her skin, but she barely felt it. Her pulse roared too loudly. Rowan lifted his rifle. He didn't fire blindly. He waited, breathing slow, listening. The mountain fell into a strange silence after the last shot. No more gunfire, just wind sweeping snow across the trees. "They're repositioning," he muttered. "How do you know?" He didn't answer that. Instead, he crouched lower, scanning the tree line. Then he spoke without looking at her. "When I say run, you run toward the cabin. Don't look back. What about you?" "I'll handle it." Her stomach twisted. "Rowan," he turned sharply. "Martha." The way he said her name wasn't annoyed, it was urgent. "If they take you, they win." "Why?" He hesitated. And in that flicker of hesitation, another gunshot, closer. The rock beside her exploded in shards. Rowan fired back, one clean, deafening shot. A distant cry answered, then silence again. Snow fell harder now, thick and blinding. This storm will cover their tracks, he said. They won't push further in it. You sound certain. I'm not. He lowered the rifle slowly. Minutes passed, no more shots, no movement, just the relentless snowfall. Finally, Rowan rose carefully. They've pulled back. Martha tried to stand, but her legs trembled violently, he noticed. Without a word, he offered his hand. She stared at it, big, scarred, rough. She took it. He pulled her up with ease. Their faces were inches apart. You still want to turn back? He asked quietly. Her lips trembled. I left because I was already dying there. Something in his expression shifted, a crack in stone. Then he released her hand abruptly and began walking again. They reached the cabin just as full night fell. It was built into the mountainside, solid logs reinforced with stone, smoke rising faintly from the chimney. Rowan pushed the door open and ushered her inside. Warmth, dim lantern light, the scent of cedar and iron. Martha stepped in slowly. This was it, her new life. Rowan barred the door immediately, sliding a heavy beam into place. He checked the windows, checked them twice. You live like you're under siege, she murmured. I am. He finally removed his coat, revealing broad shoulders tense beneath a worn shirt. Who are they? She asked again. He stared at the fire. Men who think fear makes ownership easier. And does it? He looked at her then, snow melting in his dark hair. No, silence stretched between them. The storm roared outside now, violent and relentless. Rowan pointed toward a single large bed in the corner. You take that. And you, Floor, we're married, on paper. The bluntness stung more than she expected. She swallowed. I didn't come here for comfort, she said quietly. Good, he turned away, but as she unpacked her small trunk, she noticed something. 3 times before bed, Rowan checked the door, not because he didn't trust her, because he feared something coming for her. And as Martha lay beneath heavy quilts listening to the wind scream against the walls, she understood something deeply unsettling. The gunmen hadn't come because of the land, they had come because of Rowan. And whoever wanted him gone wasn't finished yet. The storm did not stop for 3 days. It buried the world outside in white silence. No gunshots, no riders, no footprints. Just wind clawing at the cabin walls like something trying to get in. Inside, tension thickened the air. Martha woke the first morning to find Rowan already gone from the cabin. Panic shot through her chest. She threw back the quilt and rushed to the door. It was still barred from the inside. The latch lifted. He stepped in carrying an armful of firewood, snow dusting his shoulders. You left, she breathed. Needed to check the horses. He moved past her without ceremony, but he'd locked the door behind himself. From the inside, for her, she pretended not to notice. By noon, the silence between them grew heavy. The cabin was not clean. Tools scattered, tin plates crusted, mud dried across the floorboards. This wasn't a home, it was survival. Martha rolled up her sleeves. What are you doing? Rowan asked, watching her drag a bucket across the room. Living here, he frowned. You don't have to, I know. She dipped a rag into boiling water and began scrubbing the floor. The movement wasn't graceful, her knees protested, her back ached, but anger fueled her. Every insult she'd swallowed in red hollow scrubbed out with each stroke. Rowan watched in silence for a long time. You'll hurt yourself. I've been hurting myself for years, she replied quietly. At least this way it leads somewhere. That shut him up. By evening the cabin smelled different, cleaner, warmer, more human. Martha found flour in a tin chest and dried apples hanging from the rafters. She worked the dough with steady hands. When Rowan sat down at the table, she placed a thick slice of apple bread in front of him. He stared at it, then at her. You cook like this in town? Yes. And they still, yes. He took a bite, chewed. His expression didn't change. But he reached for another slice immediately. Huh, he muttered. Huh, she echoed. It's good. The admission came awkwardly, like he wasn't used to giving them. Warmth spread through her chest, not from the fire, from that single word. They ate quietly. The wind howled louder outside, then a sudden bang against the cabin wall. Martha flinched violently. Rowan was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. Another thud, heavy, deliberate, her breath hitched. They found us, she whispered. Rowan moved toward the window slowly, peered through the frost, then exhaled sharply. It's the loose shutter. She let out a shaky laugh. Oh, her knees nearly buckled with relief. He glanced back at her. And something about her trembling form stirred something in him. You're not afraid of men with guns, he observed. I am, she admitted. Then why come here? She looked at him, long and steady. Because I was more afraid of never being chosen. The words hung there. Rowan's grip tightened slightly on the rifle. You think I chose you? The question wasn't cruel, it was vulnerable. She stepped closer. Didn't you? The fire crackled loudly between them. Rowan opened his mouth, then froze. Outside, a faint glow flickered through the snowstorm. Orange, distant, but unmistakable. Fire, not near the shed this time. Closer, much closer. And Rowan's face went completely still. They're back, he whispered, and this time they weren't aiming at him, they were aiming at her. The orange glow pulsed through the storm like a heartbeat. Martha's throat tightened. That's not the shed, she whispered. Rowan didn't answer, he was already moving. He blew out one lantern, then the other, plunging the cabin into dim firelight only. Stay behind me, he said, voice low. Another flare of orange flickered through the window, this time closer. Snow carried the faint scent of smoke. They're circling, Rowan muttered. A loud crack echoed from the side of the cabin, wood splitting. Martha gasped. Back room, he ordered. I'm not hiding, his jaw flexed. This isn't pride. It's tactics, another crash. The shutter ripped free, slamming against the outer wall. A shadow passed briefly across the window, not imagination. Someone was out there. Rowan moved to the door, pressing his ear against the wood, footsteps, multiple. Crunching deliberately through snow, a voice carried through the wind. Rowan Kincaid, it called smoothly. You're persistent, I'll give you that. Martha felt ice flood her veins. That's him, Rowan said quietly. Who? Edgar Voss. The name felt heavy. Investor, she asked. Predator. A slow, mocking laugh drifted through the storm. You hiding in there with your new bride? Heard she's substantial. Martha's stomach dropped. Rowan's hands tightened into fists. Open the door, Kincaid. Let's talk like gentlemen. You've never been one, Rowan called back. Another voice chimed in, younger, smug. Bet she's trembling, huh? Big girls cry loud, ha ha ha. The sound cut through her like glass, old humiliation rising, hot, sharp. Rowan took a step toward the door. Martha grabbed his arm. Don't, his eyes flashed. They won't speak about you like that. They already have, she said softly. That stopped him. Outside, Voss's voice lowered. You've got two choices, Rowan. Sign the timber rights over or we burn it down. Try it. Silence, then the unmistakable splash of liquid against wood. Martha smelled it instantly. Coal oil. Her pulse thundered. They wouldn't, she breathed. They would. A match struck outside, the faint scratch and flare. Time slowed. Rowan moved for the door. Martha moved faster. She stepped in front of him. If you go out there shooting, you'll die. And if I don't, they'll torch this place. Then we outthink them. He stared at her, conflicted, furious. 3 men, he said. At least 3 men who think we're afraid. Another splash of oil hit the outer wall. Martha's breathing grew steadier, not faster, strangely calm. They don't know this cabin like you do. No, they don't know the land like you do. No, they don't know me. That flicker again. In his eyes, you have a plan, he asked. Her lips parted. She did, but it was reckless, dangerous. And it required something he didn't know about the cellar beneath the floor. Outside, Voss called again. Last chance, Kincaid. Flame licked briefly along the cabin's lower wall, then died in the snow. A warning, not a full burn. Yet, Rowan's breathing turned heavy. He was seconds away from charging out that door. And Martha realized something terrifying. If he stepped outside right now, he wouldn't come back. She leaned close, voice barely above a whisper, trust me. His eyes locked onto hers, hard, searching. For the first time he hesitated. And outside, Edgar Voss grew impatient. Light it. The match flared again, and this time the fire caught. Flames crawled up the cabin wall like hungry fingers. Martha didn't scream, she didn't panic. She turned and ran toward the kitchen floorboards. Rowan grabbed her wrist. What are you doing? Buying time. She dropped to her knees and shoved aside a rug near the hearth. Beneath it, a square iron ring embedded in wood. Rowan's eyes widened. You found it. You keep blasting powder down there. His jaw tightened. That's for clearing stumps, and tonight we clear wolves. Another crash shook the wall. Smoke began seeping through cracks. They'll burn us out, one of the men shouted outside. Martha yanked the trapdoor open. Cold, earthy darkness yawned below. Rowan stared at her. You're not suggesting, yes, no, yes, they'll shoot you before you strike a fuse. Then you make them step inside first. Another splash of oil hit the opposite wall. Flames roared higher now, heat licking through the logs. Rowan's breath grew ragged. You don't know what that blast will do. I know what staying will do. She met his eyes fully. You once asked if you chose me. The cabin creaked as fire climbed. Choose me now. His face twisted, not anger, fear for her. Outside, Voss's voice rang again. Hope you're praying, big girl. Ha ha ha. The laughter scraped across her skin. Something inside her hardened. Help me move the keg, she ordered. He didn't argue again. Together they dragged a small barrel from beneath the cellar ladder. It was heavy. Rowan moved like a machine. Martha moved with stubborn force. They positioned it near the center of the floor. She shoved a length of fuse into the opening. Rowan grabbed her shoulders. If this goes wrong, it won't. It might, she leaned closer. If it does, at least I won't die hiding. The fire reached the window frame. Glass cracked with sharp pops. Smoke thickened. Boots pounded against the porch. They're coming in. Rowan lifted his rifle and stepped toward the door. Martha grabbed the lantern, lit the fuse. It hissed angrily, alive. Outside, the door splintered under a heavy kick. Inside, someone shouted. The beam cracked, wood shattered, the door burst inward. Three figures silhouetted by firelight rushed in, and Rowan fired once. A man fell back screaming. The other two lunged forward. The fuse burned closer, closer. Martha stood over the open cellar. Rowan, she screamed. He turned, saw the fuse. Saw her, and for a split second he understood. He dropped the rifle, ran toward her. She grabbed his coat. Down they jumped. The world exploded. White light, deafening roar. The floor above them shattered. Heat and force slammed downward like a collapsing sky. Martha hit the dirt hard. Air ripped from her lungs. Wood crashed above. Then silence, heavy ringing darkness. She coughed violently, dust filling her mouth. Rowan, she croaked, no answer. Panic clawed at her throat. She reached blindly in the dark and felt his hand. Warm, alive, above them the cabin groaned as beams shifted, but the gunshots were gone, the laughter was gone, the fire was gone. They had stopped it, but at what cost? And as dirt began falling from the cracked ceiling overhead, Martha realized something terrifying. The mountain wasn't done testing them yet. For a long moment there was nothing but ringing, not silence, not peace. Just that high, shrill hum inside Martha's ears that made the world feel unreal. She clutched Rowan's hand in the darkness. Say something, she whispered hoarsely. A cough answered her, then another. I'm here. Relief crashed through her so violently she almost sobbed. Above them, debris shifted. Something heavy collapsed with a dull thud, the cabin, or what was left of it. Smoke seeped through cracks in the broken boards overhead. Dirt rained down in soft showers. We need to move, Rowan rasped. She tried to sit up. Pain flared along her shoulder. I think I hit the ladder. You're breathing, that's enough. Even now, his voice held that steady calm. But she could feel the tremor in his hand, not fear for himself. For her, they pushed upward together. The trapdoor was warped, wedged under collapsed beams. Rowan braced his boots against the cellar wall and shoved. Wood groaned, nothing. He shoved harder, veins stood out along his neck, still nothing. Above them, wind began howling through broken gaps in the cabin. Cold air flooded down, snow drifted in. They'll freeze, Martha whispered suddenly. Rowan paused. Them, the men upstairs, the ones who had stormed in laughing. She hadn't meant to care, but she did, even now. Voss, Rowan said quietly. He won't survive that blast. There was no triumph in his tone, only fact. Another beam shifted above. The ceiling cracked. Rowan's eyes darkened. Stand back. He positioned himself beneath the trapdoor again, braced, and roared as he heaved upward with everything in him. The hinges snapped, the door burst open. Light flooded in through smoke and swirling snow. Rowan climbed first, pulling Martha up after him. She stumbled into the ruins. The cabin was half gone, the front wall obliterated, the porch scattered. Two bodies lay near the entrance, motionless. A third figure crawled weakly through the snow toward the tree line. Voss, his expensive coat torn, face streaked with blood, he looked up, saw them standing there, alive. His expression twisted from disbelief to horror. You, he wheezed. Rowan stepped forward instinctively. Martha grabbed his arm. Wait. Voss fumbled for something inside his coat, a pistol. His hand shook violently. He aimed poorly, fired. The bullet struck snow beside Rowan's boot. Rowan didn't flinch, he walked forward slowly, deliberately. Voss tried to fire again, the gun clicked empty. Rowan stopped inches from him, snow fell between them. You lost, Rowan said quietly. Voss laughed weakly, a broken sound. You blew up your own house. Rowan glanced back at Martha, standing tall in the wreckage, smoke swirling behind her like battle fog. He looked back at Voss. I didn't. Voss followed his gaze, understanding dawned, his face paled. She did, Martha met his eyes. Yes, he let out a weak, disbelieving breath. Ha ha ha, insane. No, Rowan said softly. Unbreakable, Voss collapsed backward into the snow, strength gone. Rowan turned away from him, back to Martha. The wind tore through the ruins. They had no cabin, no walls, no shelter, only each other in a half-buried cellar. Rowan stepped toward her slowly, snow gathered in his dark hair. You trusted me, he said. You trusted me first. He swallowed. Then, without hesitation, he pulled her into him, tight, not because she needed saving, but because he did, his forehead pressed against hers. We build again, he murmured. Yes, stronger. Yes, and this time his voice lowered. They won't come back, she wanted to believe that. But as dawn crept over the Blackridge Mountains and distant riders appeared far below in the valley, Martha realized something chilling. Voss had not been acting alone, and the war for this land was only beginning. The riders below didn't rush the mountain, they watched it, three dark silhouettes against the pale morning snow. Martha's stomach tightened. Friends of his, she asked quietly. Rowan's jaw hardened. Investors, meaning Voss doesn't lose money without making noise about it. Behind them the ruined cabin creaked in the wind, smoke still curled from shattered beams. Snow settled over the two unmoving bodies near the porch. Voss was gone, vanished into the tree line sometime while they stood there catching their breath. He crawled away, Martha said. Rowan nodded once. Wounded men are dangerous. So are desperate ones. His gaze shifted to her. A flicker of something like reluctant admiration passed through his eyes. We can't stay exposed, he said. Cellar will hold for now. They climbed back down into the dirt-rooted space beneath the ruins. It was cramped, low-ceilinged, but intact. Shelves of preserved food lined the walls. Kegs of powder remained untouched at the far end. Rowan lit a lantern. Soft light filled the space. Martha sank onto a crate. Her hands began trembling now that the adrenaline had faded. Rowan crouched in front of her. You're hurt. I'm fine. You're shaking. So are you. Silence. He exhaled slowly. They'll return with legal claims next. Try to say the land is unstable, dangerous, that I'm reckless. You are reckless, she said softly, a corner of his mouth almost lifted. Tonight, yes. She reached out hesitantly, placed her hand over his. You didn't choose wrong. He stared at their hands. Neither did you. Outside, wind swept across broken beams. The riders below finally turned their horses and disappeared down the valley trail. Watching, reporting, waiting, Rowan stood. We rebuild immediately. In winter, yes, she blinked. You just lost half your cabin. He looked at her steadily. I gained something more important, her breath caught. He cleared his throat roughly and turned away before the moment deepened too far. They spent the day dragging salvageable timber into a pile. Snow fell lightly, cold bit through her boots, but they worked side by side, not awkward. Not distant, a rhythm forming between them. At dusk, as they lowered a temporary roof frame over part of the cellar entrance, Rowan suddenly paused. Why did you really come here? He asked without looking at her. She wiped sweat from her brow. I told you. No, he faced her fully. Why risk death for a stranger? She hesitated, then answered honestly. Because I was already invisible where I came from. And I would rather be seen in danger than ignored in safety. The words hit him harder than the explosion had. He looked at her differently now, not assessing, not doubting, seeing. The wind howled again across the mountain, night fell. They returned to the cellar for shelter. And as Martha lay on folded blankets, listening to Rowan's steady breathing nearby, she felt something unfamiliar rising in her chest. Hope. But hope, she was learning, was the most dangerous thing of all. Because far below the ridge in the town courthouse, Edgar Voss was already filing papers. And this time he wasn't bringing fire, he was bringing the law. The law arrived before the snow finished melting, not with guns, not with torches. With paper, 3 days after the explosion, a rider in a gray coat climbed the ridge slowly, carefully, as if afraid the mountain itself might object to his presence. Rowan saw him first. "Marshal," he muttered. Martha's stomach dipped. They had rebuilt enough to create a partial structure, rough beams over the cellar, salvaged boards forming two walls, smoke rising from a temporary stove pipe. It wasn't beautiful, but it stood. The rider dismounted stiffly. Rowan Kincaid, yes, the marshal removed his gloves deliberately. His eyes scanned the burned earth, the crater where the blast had torn through timber. "You've caused quite a disturbance." Rowan's expression didn't change. "Men attacked my property. They claim you detonated explosives recklessly, killed two hired workers." Martha stepped forward. "They broke in first." The marshal's eyes moved to her, assessing, not cruel, just measuring. "You're his wife." "Yes," he looked back at Rowan. "There's a complaint filed in Red Hollow County Court. Edgar Voss is pressing for removal of your claim on grounds of instability and violent conduct." Rowan's jaw flexed. "So he hides behind ink now." The marshal shrugged slightly. "Court hearing in 2 weeks. You're expected to appear." Martha felt cold seep into her bones. 2 weeks, down the mountain, into town where Voss controlled perception. "Failure to appear," the marshal continued, "results in immediate forfeiture." He remounted his horse. "Bring your documents and your witnesses." Witnesses, the word echoed ominously. The marshal rode off. Snow drifted lightly behind him. Silence settled heavy. Rowan turned away sharply. "They'll twist it," he muttered. "Call me unstable. Dangerous, reckless." "You did blow up the cabin," Martha said gently. "You lit the fuse. And you jumped with me." He stopped walking, looked at her for a long moment. "You could lose everything," he said. "So could you. I've lost before." The words came out raw, unpolished. She stepped closer. "And you survived." His eyes searched her face, not for weakness, for certainty. "We go to court," she said firmly. Together, he studied her as if weighing whether she truly understood what that meant. "Town will talk. They already do. They'll mock you. They always have." He almost smiled. "Almost. You're stubborn." "Yes," he exhaled slowly. 2 weeks, they worked harder after that, reinforcing beams, organizing paperwork. Rowan retrieved official land grant documents from a hidden metal box buried near the rock wall. Martha watched him carefully seal them in oilcloth. At night he paced more, sleep came slower. The storm outside had ended, but another one was forming, in town, in court, and Martha knew something Rowan didn't. Voss wouldn't rely only on false testimony. He would dig into her past, into Red Hollow, into her father, and if Voss found someone willing to speak against her, someone eager to laugh again, the court wouldn't need flames to destroy them. It would only need shame, and Martha had spent her whole life learning how powerful that could be. The ride down the mountain felt longer than the ride up, not because of snow, because of memory. Martha hadn't seen Red Hollow since the day she left with her trunk and shaking hands. Now she rode beside Rowan on the narrow trail, the rebuilt cabin shrinking behind them. "You don't have to go in," Rowan said quietly. "Yes, I do." He didn't argue again. When the town came into view, her pulse quickened. Familiar rooftops, the church steeple, the bakery chimney, nothing had changed except her. They entered town together, side by side. Heads turned instantly. Whispers started before they reached Main Street. "That's her. She blew up a cabin. Look at the size of her." "Ha ha ha," the old sting flickered, then faded, because this time she wasn't alone. Rowan's presence beside her was steady, unmovable. They stopped in front of the courthouse. Stone steps, tall wooden doors, and at the base, Edgar Voss, cleaned up, bandaged across one temple, smiling thinly. "Well," he drawled, removing his gloves, "the mountain couple descends." Rowan didn't slow. Voss's eyes slid to Martha. "You look combustible." She met his gaze evenly. "You look flammable." A few townsfolk snorted softly. Voss's smile tightened. Inside the courthouse, the air smelled of ink and dust. Judge Halbrook presided, a man with sharp eyes and a reputation for valuing reputation over truth. That worried Martha. Voss began first, calm, polished. He described Rowan as unstable, volatile, dangerous to investors and community alike. He called 2 men from town to testify, workers claiming Rowan had threatened them months prior. Half-truths, twisted. Then Voss gestured toward Martha. "And the wife, newly arrived, reckless enough to detonate explosives inside a structure." Eyes turned, Martha stood slowly. Rowan reached for her hand under the table. She squeezed once, then released. She walked to the front, felt every stare, every old whisper threatening to rise. Judge Halbrook studied her. "You lit the fuse?" "Yes," murmurs filled the room. "Why?" the judge asked. She swallowed. "Because 3 armed men broke into our home after setting it on fire." "That home is now rubble," Voss interjected smoothly. "Yes," she replied calmly, "but we are not." A ripple of quiet passed through the courtroom. She continued. "They wanted him dead, they mocked me, they poured oil on the walls, I used what we had to survive." The judge leaned back. "You admit to detonation." "I admit to self-defense," Voss smiled faintly. "And what proof do you have that my clients attacked first?" Silence. The weight of it pressed heavy. Then the courtroom doors creaked open. Boots stepped inside, snow still clinging to leather. The marshal. He removed his hat. "I'd like to speak," he said. All heads turned. Martha's heart hammered, because if he sided with Voss, everything would collapse, but if he told the truth, the mountain would finally speak for them, and Rowan's fate would hang on every word. The courtroom held its breath. The marshal walked forward slowly, boots echoing against the wooden floor. Edgar Voss's smile flickered, but only slightly. Judge Halbrook adjusted his spectacles. "State your name for the record." "Marshal Thomas Grady." "And what is your involvement in this matter?" "I inspected the Kincaid property the morning after the explosion." Every eye shifted toward Rowan, toward Martha, toward Voss. The marshal continued. "I found evidence of forced entry, coal oil residue along the cabin exterior, boot impressions belonging to 3 separate individuals." A murmur rippled through the room. Voss's jaw tightened. "And the deceased men?" the judge pressed. "Armed," the marshal said evenly. "Both carried pistols, one discharged." Silence thickened. Voss stepped forward smoothly. "Marshal, surely you can't confirm who lit the fuse." "I can confirm," Grady replied calmly, "that Mrs. Kincaid acted after the door was breached." Martha's chest tightened. The judge leaned back slowly. "Mr. Voss," he said carefully, "did your associates enter the Kincaid cabin without invitation?" Voss's polished composure finally cracked. "They were negotiating with firearms," the judge interrupted. Voss hesitated. That was enough. The judge turned his gaze toward Rowan. "Your land claim remains intact pending structural rebuilding. However, any further explosive conduct, there won't be," Rowan said firmly. Judge Halbrook nodded once. "This court finds insufficient evidence to revoke Mr. Kincaid's claim." A collective exhale filled the room. Martha didn't realize she'd been holding her breath until it left her in a shaky rush. Rowan's hand found hers again beneath the table. Warm, steady. Voss stood rigid, humiliation burning in his eyes. As the courtroom began to empty, he stepped close to them, voice low. "You won today." Rowan didn't respond. Voss's gaze slid to Martha. "You think this ends here?" She met his stare. Yes, confidence, not bravado, certainty. Something in her expression unsettled him. He stepped back, smiled thinly, and walked away. Outside, townsfolk gathered along the street. Whispers again, but different now. Self-defense. She saved him. She stood up in court, not laughter, respect. Rowan looked at her as they stepped down the courthouse stairs. "You didn't tremble." "Oh, I did," she said softly. "I just didn't let it show." A faint smile tugged at his mouth. They mounted their horses. Rode toward the mountain again, together. Halfway up the ridge, Rowan spoke quietly. "I didn't choose wrong." Her throat tightened. "No," he glanced at her, "I chose strength." The wind moved through the trees gently now, not howling, not hostile, as if the mountain itself had shifted. But as they reached the ridge, Martha noticed something waiting near the rebuilt frame of their cabin. A wagon, unfamiliar, and beside it a woman, standing very still, watching them. And when Rowan saw her, his face went completely pale. Rowan did not move. For a man who had faced gunfire without flinching, he looked as if the air had been knocked from his lungs. The woman by the wagon stood tall, wrapped in a dark traveling cloak. Her hair, streaked with silver, was pinned neatly beneath a bonnet. She wasn't young, she wasn't frightened, she was composed, too composed. Martha felt it immediately. This wasn't coincidence. "Do you know her?" she asked quietly. Rowan swallowed. "Yes, just that." He dismounted slowly. The woman stepped forward as they approached. "Rowan," she said, her voice was calm, familiar, it held history. Martha's stomach tightened. I didn't expect you to return, the woman continued, her gaze briefly sliding toward Martha. Measuring, Rowan's voice came out rough. You shouldn't be here. I didn't come for you. The words landed heavily. She turned fully to Martha. You must be the new wife. New, not real, not permanent. Martha slid off the horse carefully. And you are, the woman held her gaze, Clara Whitmore. The name hit Rowan like a blow, Martha noticed. Clara continued gently, almost kindly. I was married to Rowan. The world tilted. Rowan's jaw tightened. That was 10 years ago. And yet, Clara replied softly, here I stand. Martha's pulse pounded in her ears. You said your wife died, she said slowly, looking at Rowan. He didn't look at her. She did, Clara's expression flickered. Is that what you told her? The wind shifted between them, cold, sharp. Rowan's eyes finally lifted to Martha's. There was a fire, he said quietly. A winter storm, schoolhouse roof collapsed. Clara and our daughter were inside. Clara's lips pressed thin. I survived. Martha's breath caught. But our daughter didn't, Clara continued, her voice tightening slightly for the first time. I was pulled from the wreckage by a passing freight crew, taken east for recovery. Letters were sent. Rowan shook his head slowly. I received none. I sent 5, silence, thick, painful. Clara's gaze softened slightly toward Martha. I returned last month, learned he'd remarried. Martha's heart pounded painfully. You're alive, she said faintly. Yes, the word echoed. Alive, meaning legally Rowan's marriage to Martha was invalid. Illegitimate, void. Clara's next words confirmed it. The law doesn't dissolve a marriage simply because one party assumes death. Martha felt the ground drop away. Rowan stepped forward sharply. What do you want? Clara met his gaze evenly. What was always mine? The mountain air felt suffocating. Martha forced herself to stand steady. And what is that? She asked. Clara's eyes slid back to her. His name. The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. Rowan's breathing turned uneven. Clara's wagon sat packed, intentional, prepared. She had not come to visit, she had come to reclaim. And Martha realized something devastating. She had fought gunmen, faced fire, survived court. But this wasn't a battle of strength, it was a battle of legitimacy. And the law would not side with emotion. As the wind rose again across the ridge, Martha understood something terrifying. The war for the mountain wasn't over, it had only changed form. The wind moved through the half-built beams like a warning. Clara stood still, composed, certain. Martha's heart felt like it had dropped into her boots. Rowan looked as if he were staring at a ghost that refused to vanish. You're alive, he said again, almost to himself. Yes, not bitter. Not angry, just factual. Why now? He asked. Clara's jaw tightened slightly. I spent months recovering in Denver, burns, broken ribs, memory blurred at first. When I regained clarity, I wrote you. I never received them. She studied his face carefully. Then someone ensured you didn't. A cold realization crept into Martha's chest. Voss, if Clara had returned recently, if letters had gone missing, the timing wasn't coincidence. You knew, Martha said quietly. Clara's gaze shifted to her. Knew what? That he remarried before coming up here. Clara hesitated, just slightly. I learned it in town, when, a week ago, so she had waited, watched, then chosen her moment. Rowan stepped between them unconsciously. You didn't come to see if I was happy. No, Clara admitted. I came because the land deed is in my name too. There it was, not just his name, ownership, control, the timber rights, the claim. Everything Rowan had fought to keep. Martha felt something inside her steady. This wasn't about love, it was about leverage. You want the land, she said evenly. Clara did not deny it. It was ours, Rowan's voice lowered. You left, I was carried away unconscious, and I searched for months, and when you didn't find me, you buried me. The words cracked open something deep in him. Silence stretched painfully. Martha watched them both carefully. This wasn't simple betrayal, it was unresolved grief colliding with survival. Clara stepped closer. You didn't wait long, Rowan's expression hardened. I waited 10 years. Clara's composure finally faltered for just a breath. Then she straightened again. The law doesn't measure grief by years, it measures by record. Martha felt the truth of that like ice. Legally, Clara was still his wife, which meant Martha was nothing. Rowan turned toward Martha slowly. His eyes held conflict, pain, guilt, but something else too, certainty. I believed you were dead, he said to Clara quietly. I mourned you. I know, Clara whispered. Then you must also know something else. She looked at him cautiously. I'm not the same man you left. The wind howled through the beams again. Clara studied him, then glanced at Martha, and in that glance there was recognition. Martha wasn't an accident. She wasn't a placeholder. She was chosen. Clara exhaled slowly. You have 1 week, she said calmly. 1 week to decide whether you'll contest the marriage legally or sign over your half of the claim. She turned toward her wagon. If you do neither, I file in county court. Rowan's hands curled into fists. Martha remained still. Clara climbed into the wagon seat, paused, then looked back once more. You should have searched harder. And with that she drove down the ridge, leaving silence, leaving fracture, leaving a choice that could destroy everything they had built. Rowan stood motionless. Martha finally spoke. If the law says she's your wife, his eyes closed briefly, then opened. And what does your heart say, she asked. The question hung between them heavy, unavoidable, and Rowan knew his answer would change all three of their lives. Rowan did not answer her immediately. He walked away instead, toward the edge of the ridge, toward the drop that overlooked the valley below. Martha stood where she was, wind tugging at her skirt, heart pounding so hard it made her ribs ache. She had faced fire without flinching, but this was worse, because she couldn't fight it with powder or proof. She had to wait, and waiting had always been the cruelest thing in her life. Rowan stood with his back to her for a long time. The mountains stretched vast and silent before him. I searched until spring thaw, he said finally, voice rough. When they found no body, they told me to let go. You were grieving, Martha said softly. I was drowning, he turned then. His eyes were not wild, not broken, just honest. When you arrived on that ridge, I didn't choose you because I was lonely. Her throat tightened. I chose you because you stood there like you weren't afraid of me. I was terrified, she admitted with a weak breath of laughter. I know, a pause, but you stayed. The word meant more now, stayed through gunfire, through flames. Through humiliation in court, stayed even when the law might strip her of everything. I believed Clara was gone, he continued. I buried her in my heart and something else grew in its place. Martha's pulse thundered. Say it, she whispered. He stepped toward her slowly, snow crunched under his boots. I love you. The words weren't polished. They weren't grand. They were steady, certain. They hit her harder than any explosion. Tears burned instantly in her eyes. You love me, she repeated faintly. Yes, and if the law says I don't exist, his jaw hardened, then the law is wrong, she laughed softly through her tears. That's not how courts work. No, he took her hands. Large palms engulfing hers. But I won't sign that land over to her, not because I hate her, he swallowed, but because that life ended 10 years ago. Wind swept around them. Martha felt her fear shifting, not gone, but different. What if she fights it? She asked. She will. What if she wins? He didn't hesitate this time. Then I build somewhere else. Her breath caught. You'd leave this mountain for you. He didn't even blink. Yes. Silence fell between them. Heavy, sacred, for the first time since Clara's arrival, Martha felt the ground steady beneath her. She squeezed his hands. We fight, she said firmly. His eyes darkened with something fierce. Yes, not with anger. No, not with revenge. No, with truth, he nodded once, clarity settling over him like armor. But as they stood there on the ridge, united, neither of them noticed the figure watching from below. Clara had not gone far. Her wagon sat hidden behind a cluster of trees halfway down the pass. And beside her stood Edgar Voss, speaking quietly, strategizing, because this was never just about marriage. It was about ownership. And Voss had just found the perfect wedge to split the mountain in two. Clara did not look surprised to see Edgar Voss step from behind the trees. She looked prepared. Voss brushed snow from his sleeve, expression smooth despite the faint scar still cutting across his temple from the explosion. Well, he said lightly, that was dramatic. Clara kept her gaze on the ridge above where Rowan and Martha stood side by side. You said he remarried. I did. You didn't say she would survive an explosion, Voss smiled thinly. I underestimated her. Clara finally looked at him. You underestimate women often, only when they don't serve my purpose. A pause. The air between them was colder than the wind. You approached me in town, Clara said carefully. You told me my husband had taken another wife and that my name was being erased from deeds. And it is, Voss replied smoothly. Unless you act, she studied him, you want the timber rights. I want stability and investment. You want control, he didn't deny it. Help me reclaim legal standing, Clara continued slowly, and you expect half the claim. Voss's smile widened slightly. Temporary partnership. Clara turned her gaze back to the ridge. I didn't come here for timber. No, Voss said softly. You came because he moved on. Her jaw tightened. That's not your concern. It is if emotion clouds judgment. Clara inhaled sharply. I loved him. And now she didn't answer because love and possession are not the same thing. And she wasn't entirely certain which one had driven her up that mountain. Above them, Rowan and Martha began reinforcing the outer beams before dusk. They worked in silence for a while, then Martha spoke. She's not entirely wrong. Rowan's hammer paused mid-swing. In what way? You buried her without proof. His jaw clenched. I searched. I know. She met his gaze steadily. But grief makes us accept endings we can survive. The words struck something deep. He resumed hammering, harder than necessary. She has a legal claim. Yes, and Voss is behind it. Of course he is. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the ridge. Martha wiped sweat from her brow. If this becomes a legal war, we need leverage too, Rowan frowned. What leverage? She hesitated, then spoke quietly. What if Clara doesn't actually want the land? He stilled. What do you mean? She said she came for your name. He looked at her sharply. You think this is about pride? I think it's about closure. Wind moved gently now. Not violent, not threatening. Then how do we give her that? He asked. Martha's eyes hardened slightly. We stop fighting like enemies. Before he could respond, a shot rang out from below the ridge, not aimed at them, a warning shot. Rowan grabbed his rifle instinctively. Martha turned toward the sound. Clara's wagon rolled into view again, but this time she wasn't alone. 3 riders flanked her, armed, and Edgar Voss rode at her side. Rowan's eyes went dark. They've chosen their side. Martha's heart pounded hard against her ribs. No, she whispered, they've forced her to. The riders stopped halfway up the ridge. Voss cupped his hands and called upward. Last chance, Kincaid. The mountain went still. Clara did not look up. She stared straight ahead, expression unreadable, and Martha realized something chilling. This wasn't just about ownership anymore. It was about forcing a decision. One that would either bind Rowan to his past or burn it completely, and someone was about to bleed for it. The riders stopped just below the final incline, close enough to be heard. Far enough to make it clear they expected Rowan to come down. Voss's voice carried upward through the thinning air. Sign the transfer, Rowan, or we settle this the mountain way. Rowan's grip tightened around his rifle. Martha stepped in front of him again. Don't. They brought guns, and they want you to use yours. Another shot fired into the air. Clara flinched, just slightly. Rowan noticed. Martha noticed. Voss noticed too. See, Voss shouted upward, even your lawful wife stands with us. Clara finally looked up toward the ridge. Her eyes met Rowan's, not angry, not loving, conflicted. Martha felt it clearly now. Clara hadn't come here to start bloodshed. She had come expecting a signature, a claim, a name restored. Voss had escalated it. Rowan stepped forward slowly without raising his rifle. Martha's heart lurched. What are you doing, ending this? He began walking down the slope alone. The riders shifted, weapons ready. Rowan, Martha called. He didn't look back. Clara's breath hitched when he stopped 10 feet from them. Voss smirked. Brave, foolish. Same thing. Rowan ignored him. He looked only at Clara. You want my name? She held his gaze. Yes. You want the land? A pause. It was ours. He nodded once. Then hear me. The wind fell still. Even the horses seemed to quiet. I loved you, Rowan said steadily. I buried you. I survived you. And I will not dishonor what we had. Clara's jaw trembled, barely. But that life ended, he continued, not because you died, but because we did. The words struck deep. Even Martha felt their weight. You don't want the land, Rowan said quietly. You want proof you mattered. Clara inhaled sharply. Voss shifted impatiently. Sign the paper, Kincaid. Rowan's eyes flicked to him once, cold. You interfered with letters. Voss's smile faltered. Rowan stepped closer. You knew she was alive before I did. Clara's head snapped toward Voss. What? Voss laughed dismissively. Sentimentality doesn't change contracts. Clara's face drained of color. You told me he abandoned me. Voss shrugged. It motivated you. The mountain air felt electric. Martha watched Clara carefully. Watched understanding dawn. Watched betrayal replace pride. You used me, Clara said softly. Business, Voss replied flatly. Rowan took one final step forward. I won't fight you, he said to Clara. If you want the name legally, I'll dissolve this and walk away from the claim. Martha's breath caught painfully. He didn't look at her, not because he didn't care, because he cared too much. Silence, long, tense, Clara's eyes shifted between them. Between Rowan and Martha, she saw it then. The thing she had hoped to reclaim, it wasn't the land, it wasn't the deed, it was the look in his eyes, and that belonged elsewhere now. Voss's patience snapped. Enough of this. He drew his pistol suddenly, aimed not at Rowan but at Martha. If he won't choose, I will. The world slowed. Clara gasped. Rowan moved, but he was too far. The shot cracked through the valley. And Martha felt the impact not in her chest, but in her shoulder as Clara stepped in front of her. The gunshot echoed off the cliffs like thunder trapped between stone. Martha staggered backward, but she was not the one falling. Clara was. She collapsed into the snow with a sharp, stunned breath, her cloak blooming red at the shoulder. For half a second no one moved. Then Rowan roared, not the cold, controlled fury he had shown before. This was raw, primal. He lunged forward, tackling Voss from his saddle before the man could steady his aim again. They crashed into the snow hard. The pistol flew from Voss's hand. Martha dropped to her knees beside Clara. Stay with me, she whispered urgently, pressing her gloved hand against the wound. Clara's face had gone pale, snowflakes melted against her lashes. She breathed, wincing. I didn't mean, you stepped in front of me, Martha said, voice trembling. Clara gave the faintest, breathless laugh. Reckless runs in this marriage, apparently. Another rider tried to draw his weapon, but the marshal's voice thundered from behind. Drop it! He and two deputies crested the ridge, guns raised. The remaining men froze. Rowan had Voss pinned face first into the snow, fist raised. One blow, that was all it would take. Martha saw it. Rowan, she screamed. He hesitated, breathing hard, snow clinging to his hair. Don't, she said again, softer this time. His fist trembled in the air. Clara coughed weakly behind her. I'm tired of men choosing violence for me, she whispered. That did it. Rowan lowered his hand. The marshal's men seized Voss, dragging him upright. You interfered with mail, incited armed trespass, and fired on civilians, the marshal said coldly. You'll answer for all of it. Voss's composure was gone now. You think timber dies with me, he spat. Investors will, they won't, Clara interrupted weakly. Everyone turned. She forced herself upright with Martha's help. I withdraw any claim to the land. Rowan stared at her. What? She looked at him directly. Not because I lost, she said quietly, because I see it now. Her eyes shifted to Martha. You weren't a replacement. Martha swallowed hard. Clara exhaled slowly. You were chosen. The mountain felt strangely silent, as if listening. I don't want the land, Clara continued, and I don't want your name. Her voice softened. I wanted proof that what we had mattered. Rowan stepped closer. It did, Clara nodded once. That's enough. The marshal signaled his deputies. They hauled Voss toward their horses. His empire of manipulation had crumbled in a single, careless shot. Martha pressed cloth against Clara's shoulder. It's not deep, she said, relief breaking through her voice. It went clean through. Clara winced but managed a faint smile. Good, I've had worse. Rowan knelt in front of Clara. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Then Clara said softly, build something that doesn't burn. And for the first time there was no bitterness in her voice, only closure. As the deputies led Voss away in chains, snow began falling again, gentle this time. Like a blessing instead of a warning, but Martha knew the mountain had one more change waiting for them. And it would not be born of fire, it would be born of something far more powerful. Spring came slowly to Blackridge. Snow melted in thin silver streams down the rock face. Wildflowers pushed through charred earth where the old cabin had once stood, and in its place rose something stronger, wider windows, thicker beams, a roof reinforced with iron brackets. Rowan had built it with relentless focus, not to prove strength but to promise permanence. Clara had recovered enough to travel east again. Before leaving, she signed formal withdrawal papers in front of the marshal and two witnesses. No claim, no contest, no bitterness, she left quietly, and this time Rowan did not feel unfinished. He felt resolved. Martha stood on the newly built porch one afternoon, sunlight warming her face. Her hand rested gently over the small curve beneath her dress. She hadn't told him yet. She wanted the moment to be steady, certain. Rowan approached carrying a beam across his shoulder. He set it down and wiped sweat from his brow. "You're smiling," he observed. "So are you." He looked at her carefully. "You're different." She laughed softly. "How so?" "Calmer." She took his hand slowly, guided it to her stomach. His expression shifted instantly. Confusion, then realization. Then something far deeper. Yes. The word barely left her lips before he pulled her into him, careful, gentle, as if she were made of glass and iron all at once. He pressed his forehead against hers. "After everything," he murmured, voice thick. "After everything," she echoed. He stepped back slightly, eyes shining in a way she had never seen before. "I promised you a roof that wouldn't fall. You did, and I promised to choose you. You did," he exhaled slowly. "I choose you again." The mountain breeze carried warmth now, not threat, not tension, peace. Rowan looked out over the valley where smoke from Voss's former office no longer rose. Investors had pulled out after his arrest. The land disputes ended quietly. The mountain belonged to them not because they fought hardest, but because they stood longest. Martha leaned against the porch rail. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly. "Regret what?" "Not signing away the past." He looked at her steadily. "I didn't burn the past," he said. "I buried it properly." A pause. "And I built something new." She smiled. Down in Red Hollow they still talked about the explosion. About the courtroom, about the mountain woman who lit a fuse and survived. Some laughed, some admired, but none of them could deny the truth. She had not come to be saved, she had come to stand. And the so-called monster of the mountain. He was never a monster, he was a man waiting for someone strong enough to stand beside him. Martha looked out across the land they had nearly lost, her land, their land, and somewhere in the distance thunder rolled softly, not a warning. Just a reminder, storms would always come, but this time they had built something that would not burn, and if the mountain ever tested them again, it would find two hearts, unbreakable together.